Welcome to the Man Amongst Men podcast. Live a life of intentionality, adventure, and brotherhood. Take the inner journey and live out over your edge constantly. Here are your hosts, Dominic and Brian.
It was early in 2018, and I was on YouTube scrolling around looking for something to watch. And you know how YouTube recommends certain videos to you? Well, a TEDx talk popped up that immediately stopped me in my tracks because the title of the talk was Why I, as a Black Man, Attend KKK Rallies. Okay, you've got my attention. So I clicked play, and I was immediately introduced to one of the most inspirational people walking the planet, in my humble opinion, a man by the name of Daryl Davis. What I came to learn about Daryl Davis is that over the course of his life's work, he has influenced over 200 Klansmen to give up their lifestyle in the KKK. Not just relinquishing their robe and their hood, but leaving behind their hatred, leaving behind their community, their social status, their power inside of that structure. And that blew my mind because we live in an era where we can't even have a civil disagreement about Coke versus Pepsi. And Daryl has been able to get someone who sits at the extreme end of this spectrum away from him to sit down at a table with him, across from a person who wants him obliterated from the face of this earth. And over the course of his interactions, gets that person to completely relinquish their hatred, their ideology, and in essence, develop a loving relationship with Daryl that is paramount to all of the other things that they've built their entire life around. That fascinates me. That level of transformation, that level of influence, that level of compassion and courage and curiosity fascinated me. So I became obsessed with Daryl Davis, and I started watching all of his TEDx talks. He's got a number of them. He has a documentary, which I downloaded on YouTube, and I watched that over the new year. And I put Daryl Davis on my vision board, meaning a person that I wanted to meet in 2019. Well, as it turned out, I was doing a keynote speech in Bethesda, Maryland, and about 48 hours before I was scheduled to give that speech, this thought occurred to me. I said, Daryl lives 15 minutes away in Silver Spring. What if I just reached out to him? So I sent him this note that said, Daryl, this is a bold proposition, but I'm going to be 15 minutes away from you giving a speech on this Tuesday afternoon. If you have it in you, if you're interested, I'd love to come by with my microphone, ask you a couple of questions, and record you for 30 minutes for my podcast. My listeners would love to hear from you and your story. Would you be available? And by the way, here's a picture of you on my vision board. You're right next to Barack Obama and Marie Kondo. I heard back from him a day later, and he said, tomorrow afternoon, 5 p.m. works. Daryl not only showed up and gave me a half hour of his time, he sat down with me for 3 hours, and he brought this huge duffel bag full of paraphernalia from former Klan's members, Imperial Wizards, robes and hoods and swastikas, and just generously shared his time, shared his paraphernalia, and shared the stories and the wisdom that you will hear unpacked over the course of this 3-part series, Interviews with Daryl Davis. And I couldn't think of a better person for us to do our very first interview with than Daryl Davis, because if there's anybody who is a man amongst men, it is Daryl. So please enjoy this very first episode of Daryl Davis.
Well, I'll be 61 years old this year. As a kid, my parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service, so we spent a lot of time overseas, living in various countries around the world for 2 years. Then you come back home here to the States. You're here for a few months, maybe a year, and then back overseas to another country. Overseas, I attended international schools. Anybody who had an embassy where we were stationed, all of their children attended the same school. So consequently, in the early 1960s, when I was in elementary school, I was in class with kids from Japan, France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, China, Russia, you name it. All right? I was exposed to that kind of diversity at a young age. That became my baseline, my norm. However, at the end of the assignment, when we would return home back here to the United States, I was either in all black schools or black and white schools, depending upon whether I was in the newly integrated or perhaps still segregated school. Yeah. And back then in the 1960s, there was not the amount of diversity in the classroom that I had overseas. Right. It was just black kids and white kids pretty much. Right. Maybe a lone Asian or a lone Hispanic person, but that was it. Now today, of course, it's changed. So when I was living overseas as a child, I was literally living 12 years into the future, because that amount of diversity, or what we call today multiculturalism, that term didn't even exist back then, is now the norm here. Yeah. Okay, but it wasn't when I was growing up. So I was already exposed to it. And I had a hard time trying to understand why people in my own country couldn't get along with each other when I could get along with people all over the world. Right. So I knew that's how it was supposed to be. And I thought we were the leaders in this world. Because, everybody has their patriotism, their loyalty to their country, and we always claim to be the greatest, et cetera. The best, yeah. Exactly. So how is it that people in other countries could get along, and people in my country couldn't get along with each other? Right. One of the times when I came back, I was age 10, 1968, and I was in the 4th grade. We were in a town called Belmont, Massachusetts for a few months. And I was one of 2 black children in the entire school. Myself in 4th grade, there was a little black girl in 2nd grade. So the only time I ever saw her was at recess or lunchtime. And so consequently, all of my friends were 4th and 5th graders, white. Many of my guy friends were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. So I joined, and I was the only black scout in the area. And we had a parade from nearby Lexington to Concord, Massachusetts, to commemorate the ride of Paul Revere. And there was the Cub Scouts, the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Brownies, 4-H Club, different organizations. And the streets were blocked off so we could march. Sidewalks on either side were lined with nothing but white people. I was the only black person there. And as far as I knew, people were cheering us and having a good time. But at one point down the parade route, I began getting struck with bottles, soda pop bottles and cans, and rocks and debris from the street by just a very small group of spectators. I remember it being maybe 4 or 5 people. I remember there being some kids, maybe my age, a year older, and some adults who were throwing things. And having never had any kind of precedent for this, I just thought, okay, those people don't like the Scouts. I'm ducking and dodging. I didn't know any better. My den mother, my cub master, and troop leader, they came running over. These are all white people, right? And they huddled over me with their bodies and protected me and escorted me out of the danger. It was then that I realized that I was the target because nobody else was getting this kind of protection. So naturally, I'm like, well, what did I do? Why are they doing this to me?
Yeah, you had an awareness.
Yeah, I didn't get it. And of course, they're not going to try to explain it to me while I'm trying to march and they're trying to get me, out of the danger. And they kept saying, shh, just move along, it'll be okay. And they never told me. So at age 10, I have to have answers. And so I'm making up answers because they're not giving me the information. So I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe these people are testing me because I'm the new kid on the block. How you try out the new person. I had every answer but the right answer. When I got home, my mom and dad, who were not at the march, were cleaning me up and fixing me up and asking me, how did I fall down and get all scratched and scraped up? And I told them I didn't fall down. I told them exactly what had happened. And they sat me down for the first time in my life.
At age 10?
Age 10, yeah. And explained to me what racism was. And I'm not a stupid person. I may be naive, but I had never heard the word racism. It had never come up in my life. Of course it existed, but it didn't exist in my world. I was in the diplomatic world. And in the diplomatic world, your job is to foster better relations with people around the world, with your own country. That's the purpose of the American Embassy and the Foreign Service. So you don't go over there and be racist, So I never had those experiences. I could not understand what they were saying. But what troubled me was I'm an only child, and my parents had always told me the truth about anything I asked. They never lied to me. On this day, when they were telling me this, I literally could not wrap my brain around it. And I didn't believe them. I knew they were lying. I just didn't know why they were lying, but they were lying. Because, here's my justification for calling them liars. Because I had met, even by the age of 10, I had met probably thousands of white people all over the world, and not one of them had ever done that to me. Yeah. So why would these people who didn't know me do this to me? I could understand if I had done something to somebody and they were retaliating. Sure. Yeah, that made sense. So my parents, pulling some kind of joke on me, for some reason they were deceiving me. I didn't believe them. So about a month and a half or so later, on April 4th, that same year, 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. Every city in this country, nearby Boston, which was close by to Belmont, about 20 minutes away, my hometown where I was born, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Nashville, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Detroit, you name it, they all burned to the ground, all in the name of racism, violence, destruction, all about race. And it was then that I realized my folks had not lied to me. They told me the truth, but I still did not understand why people had an issue with the color of someone's skin. It still made no sense. So yes, people do have that issue, but why? That kind of thing. Yeah. So I formed a question at that age, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? Right. And so for the next 50 years, I've been looking for the answer to that question. Yeah. So skipping ahead, after doing a lot of research, buying a lot of books on black supremacy, on white supremacy, on anti-Semitism, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis right here, trying to find out, where does that ideology come from? I know you're not born with it, but where does it come from? Where's it going? How can it be addressed? I have a library on that stuff, and I've read it all, but none of the books answered the question.
If you look at Daryl Davis's website, he refers to himself as a musician, a lecturer, and an actor. For those of you who are fans of the TV show The Wire, one of the 5 best shows of my lifetime, Daryl was on it. It's just another reason why I'm obsessed with this amazing man. And Daryl Davis is a historian because his knowledge of the KKK is unparalleled. And that includes the vast majority of Klan's members themselves. What I came to learn is that Daryl's deep-rooted wisdom and knowledge of the history and origins of the KKK is an essential element for him to be able to build rapport with the person sitting across the table from him. Because in an odd way, it communicates a respect. When he understands why the robe and the hood are the way that they are, why the symbols are the way that they are, why the history and the structure and the ideology is the way that it is, it does communicate on some subconscious level that Daryl has gone through the trouble of trying to understand the thing that's most important to the person sitting across the table from him. That builds rapport. And at the same time, his knowledge and wisdom has become an essential element to combat their ignorance. Because the biggest enemy that I think Daryl faces is their certainty in their belief system. And when Daryl is able to correct their ignorance, it creates this tiny little crack in their certainty. And when he's able to do that enough times, the cracks can become big enough where their certainty is no longer as certain, and they start to question themselves. While at the same time, the feeling of rapport building with Daryl starts to increase. And over time, that's how Daryl is able to create these amazing transformations. And there's going to be a story that will blow your mind later on in the podcast about Daryl's level of expertise of the Klan led one Klansman who recently got a promotion, who needed to pass a test on Klan history in order to get that promotion, but didn't know the answers, ends up calling Daryl for the answers, and Daryl bails the man out. That story will blow your mind. But Daryl, a man of many stories, and I just can get lost in them. has one of the best ones coming up right here. And this is about his very first encounter, his very first friendly encounter. I guess his first encounter with a Klansman ended up in violence, but this was his first friendly encounter with a Klansman in a country music bar.
I had an opportunity that just fell into my lap. I went to college and got my degree in music and became a professional musician, which is what I am today.
You played with some pretty special people.
Oh, yeah. Rock and roll, the king of rock and roll, Chuck Berry, the man who invented rock and roll. I worked with Chuck Berry for 32 years. Along the way, I worked with many other people, and I still do that. Chuck is gone now, but his legacy lives on, and I certainly keep his music alive. I'll tell you a little bit about Chuck here in a moment, and the role that rock and roll played that many people don't realize, but it needs to be credited. I'll tell you about that in a second. I became a musician, and I joined a country western band. One night, we're playing at a place called the Silver Dollar Lounge in a place called Frederick, Maryland. This is in the 1980s. Silver Dollar Lounge was an all-white lounge. Not that black people could not go in, but black people did not go in by their own choosing. And it was a good choice because they were not welcome. So here I was in the lounge. The country band wasn't my band, it was a friend of mine's band. They played there before, and they were all white. I was the only black guy in the band, and the only black guy in that lounge. So came off the bandstand on break after the first set.
You're playing piano.
Yeah, playing piano, yeah. This white gentleman came across the dance floor up behind me and put his arm around my shoulder. And I saw the band walking ahead of me to the table to go sit down and take a break. And they all were there. And I don't know anybody in this place. I'm like, who's touching me? You know, I turn around, and there's this guy. And he tells me he really enjoyed my music. It was the first time he'd ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. And I was not offended, but I was surprised because this guy was a little bit older than me. And I'm trying to think, well, doesn't he know the black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's style of piano playing? I said to him, not facetiously, but I just said, well, where do you think Jerry Lee Lewis learned how to play? He says, what are you talking about? I said, well, Jerry Lee learned that style from the same place I did, man. From black, blues, and boogie-woogie piano players. That's where rock and roll, rockabilly came from. Oh, no. Jerry Lee invented that. I ain't never seen no black man play piano like that, except for you. And I assured him, I said, look, man, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a friend of mine. He's told me himself where he learned how to play. The guy did not buy that I knew Jerry Lee. He didn't buy that Jerry Lee learned anything from black people. But he was fascinated and wanted to buy me a drink. So I don't drink alcohol, but I went to his table and had a cranberry juice with him. He took his glass and he clinks my glass and he says, you know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. And I could tell this guy was serious. But I'm thinking to myself, where's he been? You know? I mean, I'm just not tuning in, you know? Yeah. And my experience was, I sat down with every kind of person, you know, thousands of them. You know, when you do something, you oftentimes think everybody else does it too.
Sure.
You know, and that's not always the case. I said, why? He didn't answer me. He looked down at the tabletop like this. And I asked him again. He didn't answer. His buddy who was sitting next to him elbowed him and said, tell him. I said, tell me. He looked back at me just as plain as day, and he says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, that caught me off guard, and I busted out laughing. Like, what? This guy is joking me. You know, where'd he come up with some nonsense like this?
So you thought he was legitimately kidding?
Yeah, because like I told you, I literally have every book written on the Klan.
Yeah.
Okay? None of my books talk about Klansmen embracing black people, want to buy them a drink and hang out. It doesn't work that way.
So you've done all that research, all that reading, and this was your first interaction with someone who was openly in the Klan.
My first interaction with a Klansman, I beat him up. Okay? I didn't even know he was a Klansman.
Okay.
But I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Yeah, I remember
okay.
that one too.
Yeah, so this is my first friendly interaction.
Caveat.
Yeah, so I legitimately thought he was joking. And I'm trying to justify in my mind where he would come up with some crazy nonsense like that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, he thinks I'm joking him about Jerry Lee. So he's going to joke me about the Klan. I'm trying to rationalize it, right? While I'm laughing, he went inside his pocket, produced his wallet, flipped through, and handed me his Klan membership card. Ooh. I recognized the Klan logo, this red circle with a white cross and blood drop in the center. And I realized this thing is for real. So I stopped laughing, right? And gave it back to him. We talked about the Klans and different things, but he gave me his phone number. And he wanted me to call him whenever I was to come over here, back to this club with this band, because he was going to bring his Klansmen and Klanswomen friends to come hear this black guy play piano like Jerry Lee. I'm not sure he called me a black guy to his friends, but, either way.
See this guy play.
Yeah, right.
There's a surprise in it for it.
Anyway, I would call him every 6 weeks or so whenever the band was rotated back in that club with different bands. And I called him on Wednesday or Thursday and said, hey, man, we're playing down for Silver Dollar, come on out. He'd come both Friday and Saturday. Every time, he'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen. They came in regular clothes, right? They'd gather around the bandstand and watch me play, get on the floor and dance. And then on the breaks, I'd always go over to his table to say hello. Some of them would hang there because they were curious. They wanted to meet me and talk with me because they were fascinated too. The others were fascinated, but they didn't want anything to do with me. They'd see me coming and they'd stand up and take off to the back of the room somewhere. And just like, look at me from afar.
Yeah. How do you handle that?
Well,
at the time, how did you handle that emotionally?
I asked them, well, what's wrong with them? They'd make up an excuse. Oh, they're just kind of loners, they didn't say, they don't want to deal with any black people.
Right.
I could sense, that, it was up. But I just let it go. Hey, I'm happy to talk to these guys. So that went on for a while. I quit that band and went back to playing rock and roll and blues and R&B and whatever else was going on. And then it dawned on me, hey, whoa, the answer to my question that's been plaguing me since age 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me, fell right into my lap.
Wait, how old are you now?
I was 25, 26 then, okay? I decided, you know what, who better to ask that question to than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history of practicing hating people who do not look like them and who do not believe as they believe.
Yeah.
I should go back to that guy. I should call him up, because I hadn't talked to him in, a good while. After I left the band, I had no reason to go up there and hang out with the Klan, So, I should talk to him and get him to fix me up with the Klan leader for the state of Maryland.
From everything I know about Daryl, the number one love of his life is music. And that's why it seems almost poetic that the thing that kickstarted his life's work in working with Klansmen was that he was playing music at a country music bar, and the magical healing powers of music relaxed the walls, like these barriers for this white Klansman who had never sat down across the table from a black person to reach out, put his arm around Daryl, and want to have a deeper conversation with him. And as you'll come to learn through the course of our conversations in episodes 2 and 3, music has not only had such a profound effect on Daryl, but on our country's history as well, in relaxing those barriers between white and black, and how that continues to be a beautiful healing power today. As we move into this next segment of conversation with Daryl, you're going to get some amazing knowledge about his history of the Klan, its structure, and how it operates today.
A state leader, which you and I would call a governor, they call a grand dragon. The word grand designates that person as a state officer. Dragon being the top officer. Okay. A grand plaintiff would be like a lieutenant governor.
Okay.
All right. And all the governors in the different states, they report to what's known as the president, or we call the president. They call that person the Imperial Wizard.
Yeah.
Anybody who's imperial is on a national level. Wizard being the top. An imperial plaintiff would be like a vice president. Within the state, you have counties, and the county leaders report to the governor. They're known as the Great Titan. Anybody great's on the county level. At each level, you have secretaries, treasurers, etc. And then under the county level, you have districts. We would call a district leader a mayor, an alderman, a councilman, a selectman. These people are known as exalted cyclops. And then below that is just rank and file, regular, plain, white robe Klan people.
You're an expert not only on the structure, but the history of like you're a historian when it comes to this and many other things as well, music and others. And the reason why I'm interjecting here is because this is like so essential to your conversations later on as you're talking to the people who are sitting down with you. So I just wanted to interject that as your wealth of knowledge and history and understanding of how all these pieces come together is like a key player in what you do.
Exactly, because, that's your best weapon. Not a gun, not yelling and screaming, but, people say information is power. Knowledge is power. It is, because even though somebody may not like you, they will respect your knowledge. And they see, whoa, this guy really knows his stuff. He has really taken the time to learn our craft.
Yeah.
He even knows our passwords.
Yes.
Because sometimes, I freak them out. When I shake hands with them, I even give them the secret Klan handshake.
No.
Yeah.
That's a dirty trick, man. That's good stuff, though.
But so, they're curious. They appreciate that aspect. You've done your homework so they don't have to educate you. Yeah. And sometimes I end up educating them about their own organization.
The funniest story from your documentary, Accidental Courtesy, was where, I forget the gentleman's name, but he became a Grand Titan.
Oh, yeah, he didn't do his homework.
Can you tell that story? I know
sure.
But please tell that story.
Okay, so this guy, he was an exalted Cyclops, a district leader. He was being promoted to a Great Titan, county leader. So he had expanded his territory. He'd been a little lazy. Had not studied his Klan craft, because at every level you have to know certain things. His promotion ceremony was coming up that weekend, and he had not done his homework. He had no clue. He realized he's going to go take the test, he's going to blow it, and they're going to be asking questions, and he's not going to be able to answer them. He was too embarrassed to call one of his higher-ups, like the Grand Dragon or the Imperial Wizard, because he'd be too embarrassed to say, hey, I didn't study or whatever. Yeah. And so he called me.
I couldn't believe it when I heard that he called you. That's the ringtone?
That's the ringtone, man.
I expect you to have, man.
Yeah.
So he calls you.
He called me.
Yeah. And
I told him. I knew the answers. So I told him, and he got through it. He became a Great Titan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get questioned by someone who says, Daryl, why would you help that guy do that?
Yeah. I'll give you a better one. I'll answer that question for you. One time I lent him my bus. You'll like this story. Why would I help him? Because, what do I have to lose? It doesn't matter to me if he is an exalted Cyclops, a Great Titan, a Grand Dragon, Imperial Wizard, Imperial Flood, Grand Kleagle. It doesn't matter to me. He's a Klansman. It's not my world. So it doesn't matter what title he has. Okay. But it also shows him that I know a lot more than he does about his organization. I even know what it takes to become an Imperial Wizard. Okay? So, in a sense, he looks up to me. It's not really stroking my ego, but what it does is, if Daryl knows so much about this, and he got me through, he might know other things. So when I impart other information to him that goes contrary to what he is learning in the Klan, he takes me more than with a grain of salt. Because he has that respect for me. And he puts more thought into what I'm saying. And then he begins to struggle and toss and turn. Nobody wants to be wrong. We all want to be right. Yeah. When you're at a lower echelon in rank, the struggle won't take as long before you come to your senses and say, this is BS. I need to get out of this thing. Okay? But as you climb, you're given more power. Now, not more power to you and I. That means nothing to me. If you saw a wizard or a dragon, neither one of those have any power over you. They have power over their little clandom. Yeah. All right? When you rise in rank and you have that power, it becomes a little harder. Because even though you're struggling up here, and Daryl's right, but do I want to give up the power that I have? Right. Or do I want to live a lie and keep the power?
Right. And my identity is so tied up in that, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of their community.
Exactly. People have looked up to them and held them in high esteem, put them on a pedestal, all that kind of stuff. So it's a little harder at that point. But a lot of them have given it up. Yeah. That's why I don't mind doing it. Yeah. It's not going to change my world, but it gives me credibility with them, for later. Because then, I've had people come to me and ask me for advice on non-Klan related stuff, in the Klan, because they respect my knowledge.
Daryl, it's like, ironically, you end up becoming, true or false, you end up becoming almost the safest person that they can talk to.
That's a very weird thing. But you're right. They will entrust me with information that they will not even entrust their own.
Yeah.
Because I'm safe. And I've dealt honestly with them. And they appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, I've had to pause because we've arrived at one of the most profound pearls of wisdom out of a mountain of insights over this 2-hour conversation with Daryl. This concept that Daryl could become the safest person in a Klansman's life is not only absurd, it has extraordinary ramifications for Daryl's ability to create this radical transformation in a Klansman's ideology. Here's what I mean by that. Picture this. Daryl sits across from a Klansman for the very first time, and that Klansman is letting it rip, spewing the most vile, venomous, ignorant, disgusting, racist tirade towards Daryl, and Daryl never raises his fists in violence. Daryl never bangs his fists on the table, curses that person off, gets up from the table, and leaves. Instead, Daryl stays at the table, remains calm, and holds space for that person to speak their full, raw, unfiltered truth, and he remains curious. Sure, he questions and bats back and forth with them, but it's not his agenda that he's looking to push. He's not there arguing a point. He stays in a place of curiosity. And this has such a magical ability that creates a number of things. First, that constant state of curiosity communicates on a subconscious level a respect for the other person's perspective and opinion. When was the last time you sat across the table from someone for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 120 minutes, where they just continuously asked you questions about your perspective and why you believe what you believe? Even if they didn't agree with you, on some level, you would feel respected purely because they cared enough to ask those questions. That's what's happening with Daryl. And after this person has completely emptied their tank of the ugliest shit that they could possibly dump on Daryl, and he hasn't left them, he still remains at the table, that scrambles their brains. Think about it. In your even most trusted, loving relationships, if you were to say the worst unthinkable thing to the persons that you love, chances are it might take hours, weeks, years, or even a lifetime to mend that relationship. That person may never want to talk to you again. Daryl doesn't even get up from the table. And most of us have never experienced that before. And so once you've done that and you realize, here's this person that's going to stay here for me, he becomes the safest person in your life. And above and beyond the story of the man who didn't even feel safe enough to go to his own brethren about the Klan history, he went to Daryl instead. When you are the safest person in someone's life, that's rarefied air, my friends. And so that's why we start to see, I believe, that people start to question, hey, if Daryl is a person that I trust more than even my own brothers, then why am I in this brotherhood to begin with? I think that's one of the most powerful weapons that Daryl has in getting a person to question their ideology.
One thing I need to point out is this. There is no such thing today, it hasn't been for a long time, as the Ku Klux Klan. There are many different Ku Klux Klan groups, okay? They all use the same colors on their robes that designate their rank. They use the same titles, the same secret handshake, same passwords, same everything, okay? But they are separate, autonomous. They have broken away from the main central decades ago.
Why is that?
Just like any organization, somebody gets a wild hair and thinks they can do a better job, so they split and create a splinter group.
Yeah.
Or the leader was embezzling money, which is always a case for it. A lot of people do that. People start paying dues.
Yep.
And sometimes the leaders get a little greedy and take the dues. They've been driving some 20-year-old car back when they were a rank-and-file Klansman. Now they're becoming a wizard. Now they're driving a Cadillac. Something's not quite right. And they got the same job of pumping gas at the gas station. Right. No, So people splinter off. Also, some Klan groups, the leader wants to be more politically motivated. He wants the members to seek jobs in the police department, in the school board, in the county, so you can institutionalize the racism. Other people who join these groups, if they want to do that, they go to that group. If they don't want to do that, they want to go out and night ride and burn crosses and blow up churches and things like that. This group is too docile for me. I'm going to go and make my own, violent group, night ride. So you got people like that.
Okay.
And then you have some who are what you call white separatists. You have some what are called white supremacists.
Right.
Okay? So depending upon where they are, determines which group they'll go with. So you have all these different groups. They all use the name Ku Klux Klan. You might have the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the Dixie Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the Confederate Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the Rebel Knights, on and on. These are all separate Klan groups. If you see any of these groups together in public, once in a while you might see that, they will hold a united front. But behind closed doors, they are rivals, vicious rivals with each other. Yeah. They hate each other.
Recruitment, or they hate each other?
Power struggles. Too many chefs in the kitchen. Okay. Each one will say, that Klan group's a wannabe Klan. We're the real Klan. We're the true Klan.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And how does that, does it fighting and attacks?
Yes. Yeah. And some have been known to kill one another. Yeah. Wow. And beat up each other. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to give you the structure of the Klan. They're not centralized anymore. When they first were formed in 1865 and through the 1920s, yes, they were centralized.
Do you see that as progress? Meaning that they're now decentralized, they don't have a united front, they're warring with each other. Is that progress in terms of weakening the strength?
It depends upon how you want to look at it. It's progress in the sense that there is a lot of dissension within. The best way to defeat somebody is to divide and conquer. But then, on the other hand, if they were more centralized and you could influence the central body, that would be disseminated to the other chapters. Some Klan groups, you can go on YouTube right now and see another Imperial Wizard attacking me and attacking another Imperial Wizard for being friends with me.
Right.
Okay? So, because they're autonomous, they don't get along because one is doing something with this black guy and the other one refuses to have anything to do with him. So, he's a false Klan kind of thing.
This next story is the one that launched Daryl Davis to national prominence. And it's a story about the unlikely friendship that he forged with Roger Kelly, the Imperial Wizard for the state of Maryland's KKK. And the Imperial Wizard is the president of the KKK. Now, CNN picked up on this story, did a mini documentary about Daryl and Roger's relationship, and then it ran on this 24-hour news cycle on CNN. And you can see even more detail about this in Daryl Davis's TEDx talk called Why I, as a Black Man, Attend KKK Rallies. I couldn't think of a better crescendo for us to finish episode 1 of our conversation with Daryl Davis. Enjoy.
The guy in the bar at the Silver Dollar Lounge, I had him fix me up with Mr. Kelly. And he didn't want to do it because he was fearful. And he warned me, he said, Daryl, don't fool with Roger Kelly, he'll kill you. But I said, well, that's the exact reason why I need to fool with him. I want to find out why.
Had he been known to kill people before?
No, not that I was aware of. I persuaded him to give me Mr. Kelly's address and phone number. And he reluctantly did so after 20 minutes of my begging and pleading on the condition that I not tell Roger where I got his personal information. Well, he told me also not to go to Roger Kelly's house because I'd be in trouble. He suggested that I go somewhere else to this bar where the Klan, would hang out. I did go to the bar, but Roger Kelly was not there that particular time. So I had my secretary call Mr. Kelly, and I told her specifically she's white. And the reason why I had her do it is because she's white. I didn't want him to pick up in my voice that I'm black and say, I'm not talking to you, click. Yeah, and then my whole idea of writing this book, because I was going to start in Maryland, go up north, go down south, go to the Midwest and West, and interview different Klan people. I had her call Roger Kelly, my secretary. I didn't want him to pick up in my voice, like I said, and hear that I'm black, but he would know that she's white by her voice, and that would increase my chances of him maybe agreeing to meet with me. And I told her, do not tell him that I'm black unless he asks. If he asks, fine, tell him, but don't allude to it. I want him to see me in person, come to the meeting. And then once he sees me, if he decides he doesn't want to talk to me, that's fine. Yeah. So that's how that worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you ended up meeting with each other, and there was a little bit of an event. So when he showed up, there was an event there that you both thought that one of you had pulled something on each other.
Yeah, exactly. He came in a suit and tie. He came with his bodyguard, who was armed. He had a hip holster with a semi-automatic handgun in it. We sat about as close as you and I are, across from each other, a little motel table in a room. We're going along, he was saying a lot of things, that I found to be offensive. I did not take offense to them because I realized he's not talking about me. He thinks he is. He's expressing his perception of me. And that's what I'm there for. That's exactly what I'm there for. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? So he's telling me. And I mean, I like what I'm hearing, but that's the question that I asked. And he's complying by answering me. Another reason is, I realize this guy doesn't know me, so he may hate me, but he has no reason to. I'm not any of the things that he has projected upon black people. Are there black people who are lazy? Are there black people who are criminals and on welfare? Absolutely. Okay, no question about it. But for every black person he can point out, I can find a white person in the same situation. So I'm not going to be offended, so let him roll with it. The bodyguard was standing at attention to his right. And, we kept talking, and some things we agreed upon, other things that we disagreed upon, but it was all civil. Well, there was a very short, quick noise, like that, about that short, in the room, and we all jumped. And I came up out of my seat because I perceived it to be a threatening noise, only because I could not discern what it was. It was here and then gone. It didn't last long enough for me to figure out what it was, and I couldn't replay it in my mind because it was so short. I automatically assumed it was ominous. I knew I had not done anything. I'm just sitting here talking. So I figured, well, if I didn't do it, he had to have done it. And so my mind was racing. What did I say? What did I do to cause him to go off and make some threatening noise? And I'm hearing the voice of that, other guy. He told me, Daryl, don't fool with Roger Kelly. He'll kill you. So I flew up out of my chair. I hit the table because he's right across from me. And I was getting ready to dive across the table, literally. Grab the bodyguard and grab the wizard and slam him down to the ground and take away the bodyguard's gun because I was not armed. I had gone into survival mode. And when you go into survival mode, you go there because you fear for your life. And when you're in that mindset, a human being will only do one of four things. Some people will just pass out, they'll faint, because their brain cannot process that amount of fear, and it shuts down, and they faint. I don't do that. They'll tighten up, their muscles will constrict, freeze up, and they'll start shaking. And you can be punching them, whatever, and they're not even blocking, they're just being hit. That's paralysis by fear. They're too scared to move. Yeah. I don't do that either. What a lot of people will do, which is what I would have done, is to run away. That's the best option. As quickly as you can, put as much distance between yourself and the source of that fear. That was not an option for me because I cannot outrun a bullet in a motel room. I'm not the Flash, So, yeah. And so the last option is to do a preemptive strike. Get them before they get you. And that's what I came up to do. And as I was doing it, I'm looking right into his eyes, trying to figure him out. And I'm going to pounce on him. In his eyes, I could see, my eyes were looking at him, and my eyes were asking him. I didn't say a word. My eyes were asking him, what did you just do? And his eyes were responding to me, saying, what did you just do?
Right.
And the bodyguard had his hand on his gun, looking back and forth between both of us, like, what did either one of y'all just do? And Mary, my secretary, she was sitting to my left on top of the dresser because there was no more chairs in the room. There were no more chairs. We had gotten the ice bucket full of ice and cans of soda in there. Mary had done that before they even arrived because I wanted to be hospitable and offer everybody, a drink, cold beverage. So there's a bunch of soda pop in there. What had happened is, over the time that we were there, the ice had begun to melt, and the cans just shifted down the ice. That was it. And Mary realized what happened, and was explaining it when it happened again. And then we all began laughing. And at the risk of being cliche, it broke the ice. Yeah. We all began laughing at how ignorant we had been and how we had jumped to a conclusion over nothing. As I tell people, this was a teaching moment. It was not necessarily a learning moment. That would come later. The lesson taught is this: all because some foreign entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice cans of soda, entered into our little comfort zone via the noise that it made, which we were ignorant to, we became fearful of each other because we didn't know. So the lesson taught is ignorance breeds fear. If we don't cap that fear and keep it in check, the fear will breed hatred because we hate those things that frighten us. If we don't cap the hatred in turn will breed destruction. We want to destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just ignorant. Okay? So we saw the whole chain almost unravel to completion. Completion would have been had that bodyguard drawn his gun and shot somebody, or had I pounced across the table and hurt them. All right, so fortunately it stopped short of that. We see that chain happen again and again. We saw it happen in Charlottesville, all right? The Unite the Right rally down there a couple years ago. There was a lot of ignorance down there. There was a lot of fear down there. There was a lot of hatred down there. And what did it culminate in? It culminated in destruction when a white supremacist got inside his car and tried to murder as many counter-protesters as he could by driving through the crowd. He succeeded in injuring 20 people and murdering one girl named Heather Heyer. Okay? Ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. When I talk to little kids, say elementary school and stuff, I'll be standing up in their classroom talking to them like I am right now, casually, and then all of a sudden I'll go say, "Hey, there's a snake under your chair," Just at the suggestion of that, kids will squeal and scream and throw their legs up in the air, okay? Just at the suggestion. And then, of course, they realize, I start laughing. They're like, "Oh, why do you do that? There's no snake here." And so I said to them, "Why did you scream?" "Oh, I'm scared. I'm scared of snakes. I hate snakes." "Well, why do you hate them?" "Well, because they scare me." "What scares you about them?" "Well, they're slimy." "Oh, wait a minute. See, slimy, that's the ignorance. It's dry. So you're ignorant already. I hate snakes, so they're bad. They bite, they're poison. Well, there's some good snakes, there's some bad snakes. So there's your ignorance. The ignorance breeds the fear. You don't know the snake. And then you say, okay, so why are you afraid of them? Well, I hate them. Fear breeds the hatred. Okay? So I say now, let's just say, if there really was a snake under your chair, what would you want me to do? They all say, kill it. Right. The destruction. Yeah. Every time. Yeah. If we want to solve this problem, too many people are focusing on the symptoms. We need to stop focusing on the hate. We need to stop focusing on the fear. Let's go to the source. If you fix the source, which is ignorance, you cure the ignorance with education. If you fix the ignorance, there's nothing to fear. If there's nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. If you don't hate anything, you're not going to destroy anything.
So there's those 4 steps, and at the root of it is ignorance.
Exactly. It's like putting a Band-Aid on cancer. No, it's not going to work.
When Roger Kelly left the KKK, he gave Daryl his robe and his hood as artifacts for safekeeping because Daryl intends to open up a museum someday of former KKK paraphernalia. And Daryl brought that robe and the hood to our recording together. So if you head over to my Instagram account, @DominicQ, you'll see that Daryl and I took a picture together where he is holding Roger Kelly's former Imperial Wizard robe and hood. It was the first time I'd been around any KKK paraphernalia, so it was equal parts unsettling and extraordinary. And I hope you were as blown away by this first conversation of our 3-part series as I was. You're going to definitely want to tune into our second conversation, the second episode, because I asked Daryl some really pointed questions about how is he able not to take the hatred personally. He's got some amazing nuggets of wisdom that you're not going to want to miss. He shares another ridiculous story about when he lent his tour bus, because he had a tour bus for music, to the KKK, who could no longer rent buses from their normal rental facility, so that they could take that bus for a Klan rally. And then finally, Daryl talks about the subtle and insidious ways that the KKK continuously rebrands their talking points so that they can continue to reduce the stigma around what they're talking about and build membership. You're not going to want to miss it. Hey, thanks for listening to the Man Amongst Men podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want more access to tools and resources, and you want information on our upcoming live events and retreats, head on over to www.doinnerwork.com.